welcome back to Recovery Demystified. I'm your host, Hurley. I'm so happy to have y'all here today. I've got another interview episode for y'all. It is my friend Sophia, and I met her at a grant writing workshop at the library. And it was actually like a really cool situation. I mean, there was only a few of us in there, but I made really solid connections with a couple of people. As it turns out, the do-gooders of the world are like the people I get along with best. So it was really cool to meet her there and to stay connected. I just like instantly click with people oftentimes if they're also in recovery, because there's just some things that we go through that the rest of the world simply does not understand. And I was very excited when she agreed to come on the podcast. She is an awesome example of why we need to not give up on people and not stigmatize people that are in the hardest period of their lives. She is someone who was in prison several times, was using meth, selling meth, and she chose to give up her child for adoption while she was in prison. And a lot of these things, like, it does not paint a flattering picture. And what I see a lot of times happen out in the world is like this very severe stigmatization of these people and a like awful lack of compassion or hope or support. And she is a perfect example of someone who was able to eventually, after several trips to prison, get the support that she needed and move past her addiction. And now she is out there in the world just absolutely thriving and advocating for people with addictions, advocating for people who are coming out of prison, and helping people get the resources that they need. And I admire her so much for that. I think she's fucking stellar, awesome, amazing person. And I'm really excited for y'all to hear this interview today. I hope you get something out of it. During the first few minutes of the recording, there's a phone vibrating, but it stops after a couple of minutes, just so you know. And without further ado, here's my episode with Sophia.
Hello, Sophia. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Yeah, glad to be here.
Glad to have you. Will you start by introducing yourself to the audience? Let them know your pronouns and a little bit about yourself.
Sure. My name is Sophia. My pronouns are she and her. I grew up here in Northwest Arkansas. I've been in Fayetteville for about 8 years, ever since I got sober, and I'm a person in long-term recovery. I've worked in the recovery and reentry field for most of that time, just helping folks figure out their way through the same stuff I've been through.
Hell yeah. I love it when someone takes their suffering, transforms it into healing, and then brings that as a ripple effect of healing throughout the community. So thank you for the work that you do. We're here today to talk about your story with addiction and recovery. So if you'd let us know what it was like being a kid, some of your first encounters with substances, and then maybe when it got bad and how you got into recovery. So just start wherever you'd like.
Sure. So I grew up in Siloam Springs. Over in Siloam, there wasn't a lot to do, so you either churched really hard or partied really hard. I didn't realize till way later that some people were doing both. But I come from a good family. My needs were all met. I was loved really hard. But I started using, when I was really young, and I didn't experience a lot of the big T trauma until I started using. So I was 12 when I first started drinking alcohol. I think I used meth for the first time when I was about 14. And so I, used continuously for years and years and years. Somehow I graduated high school. I had a child right after high school. Maintained my using throughout that time. I found out that I didn't know how to show up as an adult in my family, to my jobs, so I couldn't hold a job. Started selling drugs to support my habit. I'm a terrible drug dealer.
That's a lot all at once. Oh my goodness. Let's rewind it back just a little bit. Let's rewind it back all the way. Okay. Was there addiction in your family growing up?
So my parents probably drank too much and they smoked pot, but they, were able to do that in the evenings and get up and go to work the next day no matter what. We were taken care of no matter what. And it did affect me in the sense that, after 6 p.m., I know that my folks aren't going to take me anywhere. I know that they may or may not remember something that they committed to. But when I started using myself, that kind of made it easier for me to get away with stuff. Like, they kept tabs on us, but they couldn't tell how intoxicated I was because of how intoxicated they were.
Do you remember at what age you started to notice your parents drinking, or did it just kind of like feel normal because it was always there? Like, how did it make you feel when you were a kid?
I think I really just started to notice their drinking when I was needing to like get a ride to a friend's house, or when there was things outside of the house that I was trying to do. And then, they got on my nerves. My dad is very like, we're just the same, but he's very loud and boisterous and very involved. And sometimes I would just, need space. And it's harder to pick up on those social cues, I think, when you're intoxicated. And so, it was, I don't know what else to say about that.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Do you feel like they were emotionally available to you when you were a kid, if you needed that kind of support?
They were, to an extent. When I was a kid, when I was younger, I had an older sister. She was about 6 years older than I was, and when I was growing up, it was the beginning of like Yahoo chat rooms. We went to the skating rink every Friday night. I had some friends from school that would come over, and my best friend lived right down the road, and so I had a lot of social outlets. I don't really recall, needing for my family to show up for me, in as much of an emotional capacity, because I did feel connected when I was a kid. It wasn't until I started using and kind of acting out that there started to be some friction between me and my family. I didn't know how to act right. I would sneak out at night. I'd stay out too late. I would beg to get to go out and do whatever I wanted. And when I would get in trouble, so I can recall one period in particular where I would get in trouble and I'd get grounded. And like, it's serious grounding. Like, you're not doing anything, you're staying home, and all I'm trying to do is go out and have fun and to be with people trying to do the same thing I was. And I remember just thinking, like, I wish they would just smack me around a little bit so I could go back out. Like, how messed up is that?
Do you remember why, when you were 12, you thought you would want to drink for the first time? Do you remember what the first time was like, and like what motivated you to start doing that?
I think it was just access. I had a friend who lived down the road, and she had stolen some alcohol from her family, I think, and I don't remember a lot of what it felt like to use those early days. Like, I don't remember, people talk about like a warm flush of their body and they finally felt comfortable. I don't remember what it was like when I was using, but I remember what it was like when I wasn't using. And as I started to grow up, my friends group got smaller and smaller as I was only hanging out with the people who partied like I partied. And there was a huge stigma against people who maybe didn't go to church or weren't, I don't know how to phrase that. Kids who got in trouble. Like, in my high school, there was just a small group of kids who got in trouble, and that was us. Mm-hmm. Whether I was at school or, hanging out on the weekends, like, my group kept getting smaller and smaller. And so we started expanding out to like older people, older kids, full-grown adults. From probably like 15, 16 on, I only spent time with people who partied like I partied. And I guess I like lost the ability to build relationships outside of that, outside of using or acquiring or trying to recover from a bender. And I had all of my relationships felt transactional. And so like, I felt like if I wasn't, looking for something or I didn't have something, like I couldn't reach out to people. And so I felt very isolated and like I had to have something to get something that I needed.
Did that sort of feel like your friendships were inauthentic in that case, if it was always transactional?
It didn't feel inauthentic. It felt very limited. though. Like, it felt authentic. Like, it felt like we were really connecting and we were having fun and it was exciting. But like, I didn't know how to function outside of that. So I didn't know how to just kick back with somebody, or I didn't know how to just go to the park or just go to the movies without something happening. And so if I wasn't partying with my friends, I was like by myself at the house, maybe watching TV.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, if you're starting by partying when you're like 12 and then that becomes your new normal, I mean, your brain is growing and developing so fast at that time. If you're learning that that is what is the experience of like your friendship at that time, if that's the essence of it, it can be hard to see outside of that. I'm curious if you feel like that rebellion stage and all the like troublemaking and sneaking out and whatnot, if that was rooted in anything, or if it was like normal teenage rebellion, or where do you think all of that came from?
I just knew that my favorite things were outside of my household. And I think that, you know, throughout my life, like this pleasure seeking has been like a constant thing for me. And it's like, I want something exciting. I want attention. I want to feel, you know, connected with people. And I was going about it in all the wrong ways. And so I had to be sneaky to get out and go to where I wanted to go. Or, you know, I would get caught. And of course, like, I would be doing something wrong. And so I get in trouble for it. And so I'd have to sneak out and I get caught. And it was just like this perpetual, just like trying to figure out how to get out and go do whatever I wanted. And whatever I wanted would change. Like, even as the night would go along, like I would blow off friends for strangers all the time. Or, you know, we'd put ourselves in risky situations and just like figure it out. And so I had a hard time sitting still. And that's something that, and just like the building relationships, sitting still and building relationships was something that I struggled with when I came into recovery and have had to like learn how to do from scratch, really.
Totally, that makes sense. And a lot of what you're saying about teenage years and the rebellion and being a bad kid compounding on itself was my experience as well. It got to a point where my parents were like, you can only hang out with your cousin, because they thought that that was like going to be okay for some reason, but it was like, oh, actually me and my cousin are just going to sit here and drink and smoke weed too. So
right.
Got you. Tell me about when you were 14 and you smoked meth for the first time. What was the catalyst there? Did you understand what was going on? Like, I know there's like a huge culture of meth in this part of Arkansas, but a lot of times like young folks maybe haven't seen the havoc that it wreaks and they're just like unaware of the consequences. And then on the other hand, like there's a lot of people that do see all of the trauma and havoc that it wreaks and try it anyway. So what was your experience with that at that age? So
I don't think that I had been really exposed to the consequences that people were suffering, whether it was people I knew or their parents that were using. Like, we didn't talk about it at that age, and so I didn't recognize like what it was that was affecting them. And the first time that I used, I had a friend who was like dating this guy, and it was I had an opportunity to use it, and we did, and it was so fun. Like, we just stayed up all night talking, and what did we do? We were like painting the inside of her parents' new house, and we did a terrible job, but it was really great. And I think the next time it was another friend who was dating an older guy, and we used, and then I went home and it was fine again. And eventually I had a guy who I was dating who was friends with this couple. The boyfriend was selling meth, and so we had a lot of access, and I became friends with the girlfriend, and again, we would just stay up all night connecting and tinkering with things and cleaning, like deep cleaning something that was already clean. But I didn't experience any real consequences until I started using more regularly and selling, staying up for days at a time, and still trying to maintain like school and home life and other friendships, because most of my friends at the time were all drinkers, and so they were afraid of meth, and I didn't get that because I had only had a good experience with it at that time. Yeah, that was going to be my next question, is like, all of this is happening during high school when you're like pretty young still.
but it seemed to like accelerate pretty fast also, especially hanging out with like older people and drug dealers and whatnot. I was interested to know if you were able to like graduate high school, or like what changed like within the school atmosphere for you, and then like how quickly things started to spiral and when you started to notice consequences.
I think one of the first consequences was the guy that I had been dating who knew this other couple. He started to spiral. Like, he had already dropped out of school, and he would just show up a wreck and would just be like out of control. And I didn't understand that. I hadn't gotten to that point. And that was really scary for me. And I like really cared about this guy too. And so I didn't know how to help him. I didn't know how to deal with him.
Did you connect it to the drugs, or what was going through your mind about it?
I really don't. It feels like it was always kind of a little bit of a tumultuous relationship. Like, I believe he was unhoused. He was like couch hopping, but he was really cute and he was really fun. And he like introduced me to these new people and these new places that I could go and party at. And so it just gradually got worse with him, and but I was already like invested. Like, I have a hard time pulling out when I'm socially invested in this person or this place, or of course the feelings are there, and I have a tendency to show up and try to save or help, really to control people, and I thought that I could be helpful to him, and I can remember wondering what he would do without me. To drive him around, or to feed him, or to show him, compassion and, attention and all of that.
Yeah, there's definitely like a balance in between like helping our loved ones who are struggling, and then, yeah, like you're saying, trying to control them or thinking that we can save them. Because we are all interconnected as people, and we all have effects on each other's lives, but ultimately we can't control other people. We can only control ourselves. So it's interesting that you had that experience at such a young age. When did something start to happen, like in your own experience personally, where you're like, oh, maybe this isn't 100% all it's cracked up to be?
I think it would be when I started selling drugs.
What age was that?
I was probably 16 or 17. I had started working at Sonic, and that didn't last long. And so I remember using my last paycheck to buy a bunch of weed, sold weed to support my habit for a while. And then I was probably 17 when I met this guy who was selling dope. And he kind of turned me on to selling dope to support my habit. And the population of people who are buying meth as opposed to marijuana is different. And
you want to expound upon that a little bit? How are they different?
And this was myself included. We just have a hard time maintaining our lives, our jobs, our households, our relationships when we're using meth. And people function in a space of like chaos. It's chaotic. And so just trying to get people to follow through on their commitments. I don't know, commitments is like showing up to buy drugs for me. That's the commitment. Getting people to show up with, like they said that they would, to treat me fairly, to, create safe interactions. It was all out the window when I started selling meth.
What kind of things happened that were like out of the ordinary on a drug deal? Like what was different about interacting with people selling meth?
I took more risks, I think. I would sell to people I didn't know. People are very paranoid of what you're selling them, who's around. I can sell weed to somebody in a room full of people all day long. But selling meth to somebody, it's a little bit more tricky. It's a little bit more risky, and
is it because they're like not in their right minds? What you would say, like where the paranoia and the like deep questioning comes from? Is that just from like being strung out, or?
I think so, and I think that marijuana is more of a social drug, and when we use meth, we keep everything really close to us.
Yeah. Meth is definitely stigmatized way more, that's for sure. Perhaps it's because of the intensity of the consequences that are related to it. Were you also still using meth while you were selling?
Oh, I was definitely a user. That's the only reason I was selling, was to be able to use for almost free. But it also helped me show up in spaces that I wasn't comfortable in. You know, like I said, like my relationships had become transactional, and I held the power when I held the stuff, and people wanted me around.
So you're like in your late teens at this point. Did you graduate high school or did you drop out?
I did graduate high school. I am a really good test taker. I'm really good at showing up in the short term, but to commit to doing homework and stuff like that and going to school regularly, not so much. But I could show up and take the test and just barely pass. And so after I graduated high school, I wanted to go to college. I wanted to be a graphic designer. And so my plan was to go to the U of A, but then I got pregnant. And so while I was pregnant, I quit using. I enrolled in community college. I started going to school up there. I was living with my parents. Things were going all right.
Was it hard to quit using, or was it easy just with the motivation of being pregnant, or was it more complicated than that?
It wasn't at that time. That was good for me. It kind of helped me refocus and it helped improve my relationship with my parents because I wasn't out running around all the time. So I was home more. I had, constructive things to do with my day, going to school, going to work. I think I was working at McDonald's. But then after I had my son, I started using again, and I lost my job. I couldn't show up to class. I dropped out of college, and I was really struggling, still using, started selling again to support my habit.
How quickly did it all come back after you gave birth?
Quickly.
I can within remember, a month?
I can remember my son being an infant, and we were drunk, and I was sitting on my friend's bed trying to change his diaper, and I couldn't do it. And just realizing that, I could not even change his diaper, much less, take care of this small, tiny infant. That was really, really scary, but it wasn't enough to change my behavior.
I'm interested the thought process of when you decided to start using again. I feel like a lot of times for me, a little monster in my brain would be like, it's going to be okay this time. We'll keep it together. Just a little bit. It'll be fine. Was it something like that? What was the thought process before you started using again?
I would say it was similar to what you had experienced, but I hadn't had any really negative consequences yet. School was really hard. I was glad to be done with school at the time. I wanted to reconnect with my friends. I wanted to go out and do something exciting. My parents were able to help me take care of my child. We still lived there, and so I had a babysitter all of the time.
Was the baby's father in the picture or no?
No.
No. Yeah.
No. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no. I think he's somewhere drunk in Oklahoma still. He would come around occasionally, but he was also a user, and so he couldn't show up consistently. He wouldn't even show up for our child. He would show up to hook up or something like that, or he would need something. And when he kind of went away, it felt more secure than him being in and out.
Yeah, that makes sense. So you had your parents there and they were sort of helping take care of the baby. Were they still also drinking quite a bit at the time, or had anything changed for them?
Oh, no.
Same?
They continue to drink. My parents, they work really hard. They get home, they go out in the garden, they listen to NPR and drink beer and garden. That's what they've always done. And they continue to do today.
Very interesting how some people can just stay at one level like that, and maybe it's not awesome for them, but at least it's not escalating or something.
Right.
It's just curious to me how someone can maintain it for that long.
And that was baffling for me. I couldn't figure out how I couldn't show up like they did. So
after your baby was born and you started using again, was it drinking alcohol and using meth both?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And what happened after that?
So I tried to re-enroll in school. I got on the Pell Grant, and I had a lot of extra money, and so I moved into my own place with my child, trying to go back to school, trying to still use and sell drugs. Very quickly, I flunked out of school again, but I had this trailer, and so we were partying all the time. When I was 20, I was in this trailer. I was selling drugs to like pay for the trailer. My son went back and forth from my parents' house to mine. And one day, this girl had reached out to me, and she had reached out to the guy I had staying with me, and I had asked him to come sell her some meth. And I was like, oh no, you're going to sit on my couch. You're going to stay here. I will go serve this girl, and I'll come back to you. I ended up selling drugs to an undercover cop.
Oh dear.
3 times. So there were 2 more times after that where she had set me up to sell directly to an undercover cop. And so when I finally got arrested for that, I lost my place. My child went to go live with my parents. I was in jail. My parents did bail me out and got me an attorney. And so I feel like I got a way better deal than, somebody with a public defender would have, or somebody who had stayed in jail until their court dates. Because if you can't afford to bond out, you just sit in jail.
Oh, yeah.
And by the time your court date comes up, you'll take anything to get out of jail.
It's like a debtor's prison, almost like you get punished more for being poor or whatever.
That's exactly what it is. That is exactly what happens. So I was sentenced to, I had 3 delivery charges, 3 felonies. I was sentenced to 10 years with 10 suspended with a boot camp recommendation.
And what do they mean by boot camp?
So ADC, Arkansas Department of Corrections, used to run this boot camp program. And so you could go to the Department of Corrections boot camp program and get a lot of time off your sentence. And so for 10 years, you would normally serve about a third of that. So I would have been in prison for 3 years and some change. But with the boot camp recommendation, I was supposed to go to prison for a few months, go to ADC boot camp for a few months, and then go home. The boot camp program was intense. It was like a military-style boot camp program. They shaved my head. We did PT. They talked really bad to us. They didn't really teach us anything. They taught me how to sit down and be quiet and to not argue, because I saw people experience repercussions for that. But there was no rehabilitation in that space. But I did get out of prison early.
Oh my God. I'm honestly in shock. I feel like I thought I knew a lot about the prison industrial complex, but there's boot camp for drug users?
Not anymore. I don't know if somebody realized it wasn't working, or if if something happened and they had to shut it down.
I was going to say, they don't care if it works or not as long as the prison is making money. It was probably fucking illegal or something.
Probably.
That is crazy.
So that was the first time I've been to prison.
I did have one clarifying question. Also, you said it was what were the 3 charges for?
Delivery of a controlled substance.
Did they try to do child endangerment or anything like that?
The detectives didn't even know that I had a child until my second court date.
Interesting. Very great detective work there. So you do the boot camp, and then they let you out of prison after the boot camp is over. Where in Arkansas was that?
It's in central Arkansas. And so before I went to boot camp, I had to go to McPherson. It's the only women's maximum security prison in Arkansas. I was there for 8 months, waiting to go to boot camp for 3 months. And so I went from McPherson in Newport to wherever the Tucker unit is. It's down there in central Arkansas also. So the boot camp program was housed in the Tucker unit, which is a men's prison. And so we had our own little compound with all of these other, long-timers around us.
I'm interested how they justify maximum security for a nonviolent offense? Do you have any idea about that?
Oh, if you're sentenced to prison and you don't go to the one other program prison, you're going to McPherson.
It's just because there's not that many prisons in Arkansas or something?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, you're housed in there with people who committed fraud and other, like white-collar crimes, but also murderers and people who have, sexually abused people. We're just all in there together, sitting still.
Was there drugs in your prison, like were you using while you were in there, or what was the situation with that?
So I don't recall seeing any drugs in prison. I didn't see any prison tattoos. I didn't see much, illegal activity in there. I guess women's prison is very different from men's prison because we do kind of fall in line, and so they enforce the rules in women's prison better. The only real, violence that I saw or, danger that I was in, all the violence I saw was from relationships. So there was one time there was a lady who tried to cut somebody else's neck and ended up cutting her ear off in the kitchen. They shut down the kitchen for a couple days. There was another instance where a lady put a lock in a sock and beat somebody with it, and it was all over relationships. It was wild. But I rode my rack. That's what we call it. Mm-hmm. When you sit, you stay to yourself, you stay in your lane. I'm an artist, and so I drew for people a lot. So the fact that I drew pretty well and I would draw things for people, it added some value to my interactions, again, just like when I was younger. But I paid for my own commissary with that. I, limited interactions with other people while I was incarcerated through that. Other than that, I stayed to myself.
So is it mostly just boring?
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of standing in lines.
And what kind of rehabilitation did you receive in this prison there?
Well, they didn't. There are some programs within that prison, but there's a lot of circumstances around what would qualify you for one of those smaller rehab programs within the prison. So it's the amount of time that you had, the charges that you had. If you had a different kind of stipulation through the parole board. So some women will go to prison and serve out, that 1/3 of their time. They'll go in front of the parole board and they'll be like, ugh, you haven't done anything. Go back to prison for a year and complete this program. It's crazy.
So you do the 8 months and then the boot camp thing, and then they just unlocked the door and dropped you out there on the sidewalk and said good luck? Or what happened when you got out?
My family picked me up from prison. I went home. I recognized that I probably should not sell drugs anymore. But I can still use them, right? If I can get a job, then I can still use drugs. I can still party, but I don't sell them because that's what sent me to prison. That worked for a very short period of time.
How quick were you using after you got out?
Okay, so that's not right. I've been to prison 4 times, and so I mix it up some. Okay, so the first time that I went to prison, my family came and picked me up. I went back home with them. My grandpa had offered to help set me up in an apartment in Springdale, help me get a job. They were going to help me get away from Siloam Springs, change my life. And I definitely started drinking immediately. I smoked pot. I was trying to stay away from meth, and I did pretty well for a while, for about 9 months. And so I got this apartment. My child was living with me. I had a decent job. I drank solely, drank for 8 or 9 months. And I wasn't in danger like I had been before. I wasn't doing as risky of stuff. I stayed home a lot. But other than paying my bills and kind of showing up for my child, I had no life whatsoever. I stayed home and drank by myself a lot. I was afraid to go back to prison. I was restless. I was lonely. And so I ended up calling up some people that I used to know, and I ended up getting high. Very quickly, I lost my job. I lost that apartment. I had to move back with my parents. And it was just like off to the races again, selling drugs to support my drug habit.
So you went back to asylum after that?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And what happened this time?
Once I started using meth, I was afraid to show up to my parole officer. So parole works on a point system. You can get 40 points before they'll send you back to prison. I could have shown up, failed a drug test, gone to some drug classes, gotten back on track. But I was so like caught up in the mess of my addiction that I could not bring myself to show up to my parole meetings. So they violated me and sent me back to prison anyway. So if you abscond on your parole, you don't report, that's an automatic 40 points and you're going right back.
Did they send like a cop out to find you, or did you get pulled over and they served you, or like how did you get popped?
I got pulled over.
Yeah.
Yeah. They never sent anybody after me. They knew, people, when I'm not living right, like I'm gonna have police interaction at some point.
Mm-hmm. So you got pulled over, and did they just take you to jail immediately, or what happened?
Yeah, they took me to jail. I had not reported, so there was a warrant out for my arrest. They sent me down to a different kind of prison program that incorporated some treatment aspects. Like it was supposed to be a modified therapeutic community, and so you were supposed to follow these formats for holding people accountable and attend groups and stuff. But as the what was the question?
What happened the second time that you went to prison or jail? Was it jail or prison?
Prison. Every time I go to jail, I go to prison.
Okay. Yeah. And you were saying it was like a little bit more of a therapeutic program this time?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So the second time I went to prison, I went to Pine Bluff to the TVP program, this Technical Violators. It was designed to be a short-term program that kind of gave you some skills. So you were supposed to meet with a counselor once a week. I met with her once a month. You were supposed to go to groups. We rarely had groups. You were supposed to utilize this format for holding other people accountable and in turn being held accountable, but they didn't enforce it. So I was there for 3 months. I completely forgot to mention that I was pregnant during this time.
With the second child?
Yeah, with my second child during that. And so, man, I'm getting it all mixed up. The second time I went to prison, I turned myself in because I got pregnant. Oh. And so I had absconded, of course, while I was using. And when I realized that I was pregnant, I went to turn myself in, and I took a little bit of money with me. I was very sorry, for not showing up. And I thought that they would just let me go and let me, restart things. It's like, I'm going to be a mom again. They locked me up, and thank God that they did, because I still hadn't quit using at that point. And so I went to prison the second time when I was 3 or 4 months pregnant. At that time, I realized that I wasn't even taking care of the child that I had already. And how am I going to build, a life for my current child and this new child? And so I had decided to put my baby up for adoption. And I connected with an adoption agency. We started initiating the process. And that's when I had turned myself in for absconding. And I got locked up for 3 months that time. And thank God that I did, because I hadn't been able to stop using at this point. So when I got out of prison that time, I was 8 months pregnant. I was working with this adoption agency. They were helping me pick out a family to adopt my child. The idea was to just sit tight on this pregnancy for a month until I had the baby, and then that family would come, be at the hospital, and take the baby home with them. And from the very beginning, I felt good about that decision to put my baby up for adoption, but it was really hard interacting with people big and pregnant, and they're asking me about the baby's name and am I excited and just all of these things. And then when I would say that I was putting putting it up for adoption, I had a lot of pushbacks. Like, oh, you're giving your baby away? Oh, they're going to pay you some money to help, maintain your car while you're pregnant. They'll help, with certain things. So, oh, you're selling your baby? Like, it was pretty awful. It was the hardest part about giving my baby up for adoption was having to explain, and then people judging me for that decision. After the fact, like now, I still feel really good about that decision. I follow, her mom on Facebook. We've talked over Zoom once before. I'm seeing her grow up, and I'm seeing the life that this other family was able to provide for her. And I couldn't even maintain throughout my pregnancy. When I got out of prison, I drank again. Mm-hmm. I drank when I was 8 months pregnant. I just could not make any other decision. I got uncomfortable. I got in my feelings. It's like as soon as I experience hard feelings, like I revert back to drugs and alcohol. And like hard feelings for me can be loneliness or boredom or any kind of conflict. And it just like builds up in me until I don't know what to do with myself and I just need relief. And just the act of like getting and using, just like the getting of it. Like as soon as I acquire a bottle or I acquire the drug, like I start to feel immediate relief from like this crazy anxious feeling that's continuously building up in me.
Yeah, that is extremely relatable. I feel like a lot of us that have addictions use the substances to suppress like any level of discomfort, like any of the things that you're describing. And we learn that it works really well. And we learn that we can survive what feels like something that feels like so unmanageable. We learn that we can survive it by using substances. And it's interesting because your brain actually does start giving you dopamine before you use. Mm-hmm. Like when you decide to use, you get dopamine. When you obtain, you get dopamine. So what you're saying makes perfect sense to me. It's super relatable. And I'm sorry that you experienced so much judgment over your choice to put your child up for adoption. It sounds like it was right for that situation in your life, so I'm sorry you had to go through that. What happened after that?
Oh, I went off the deep end. They had given me some money when I had adopted her out, and my folks were really comfortable taking care of my child. And so I was just out there doing the very most. And eventually I got caught shoplifting after a very long night. I had shoplifted one of those containers of popcorn chicken from Harps because I was hungry. Mm-hmm. And when they stopped me for that, I also had a warrant out because I had absconded, quit reporting to my parole officer again. So this time I went and served 4 months in Pine Bluff again. I was actually there during the move when they transferred that facility from Pine Bluff to West Memphis. Still very little treatment, very little looking at myself, a lot of sitting still. And so getting released that time was the first time that I had decided not to drink alcohol. Like before it was like, okay, I can't sell drugs. I can probably still use them. The next time I was like, okay, I can't use drugs, and I can still drink. And so I gave it, I tried not to drink. I went back home. Again, I was so freaking uncomfortable. It was hard to be around my parents with my child who barely knew me. I was lonely. I called up some guy. And he came over, and I was like, I'm not going to drink, but you can drink. But, like, I can't drink. And, of course, I ended up drinking and going right back out there.
I'm going to rewind just for a second because I need to make a freaking public service announcement. You were stealing chicken because you were hungry, right?
Yeah.
Public service announcement. If you work anywhere and someone's stealing food, leave them alone. Give them more food. That's it. That's my public service announcement.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's fucking food. It's a human right.
Yeah. And I know a lot of people who have stolen just to get their most basic needs met and have suffered really severe consequences for that. Mm-hmm. And it's crazy. And they leave worse off than they were before, which was not good.
Yeah. If you see someone stealing food, let them. If you see someone in the dumpster, let them do that. But let me get off my soapbox. So you got out of prison again. That was the third time, and then you're trying not to drink or use drugs.
Yeah,
but
that didn't work.
But you're still lonely. Invite someone over. He's drinking. You didn't want to, but then the opportunity was there. So what happened after that?
Oh, yeah. Can you guess?
You absconded again.
I absconded again.
Yes. I mean, I already know that you go to prison the fourth time, so that was a little bit of a cheat. But.
Yeah. So after I absconded again, that was the first time where the opportunity to go to treatment was presented to me. And it's like, oh my gosh, like I can do something different. Mm-hmm. And so I went to rehab. I love rehab. Like I loved getting to work on myself, connecting with other people who are also trying to work on themselves. You know, I gained understanding about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Like, how do I expect to maintain these relationships when my most basic needs are not met? Like, why? So working on myself in rehab was great. When I was getting ready to leave rehab, they set me up with a women's transitional living house.
How long were you in rehab for, and how old were you at that time?
I was in rehab for, 28 days. Mm-hmm. And I was 24.
So you started using when you were 12. So for half of your life, you were using for 12 years. And this was the first time that you had received any sort of like meaningful care for your addiction?
That's right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And you loved it.
I loved it. I do really well with, a strict routine that I don't have to build or enforce myself. I think that having gone to prison a few times also kind of helped cultivate this understanding of this is what I have to do now, and then we'll go do this next. And I found a lot of comfort and security in knowing what to expect throughout my day and to not be responsible for figuring out what that was going to be. So treatment was good for me. I went to a transitional program after I got out of treatment. It was one that my son could come live with me at. It was ideal. It was the perfect opportunity for me. And so when I got out of treatment, I moved in up there and I did well for the first week. I was looking for a job. My parents were keeping my child so I could get all of these things set up. Once I had found a job, I had a week or two before that job started, and I had to sit still. I couldn't sit still, and I got really lonely and bored, and so called up some guy.
We're seeing the red flags flowing here.
And so this guy, I go to pick him up. Of course, he doesn't have a car. He probably didn't have a job. He lived with his mom, too. So I go to pick up this guy, and he gets in my car with 2 6-packs of PBR. And I was like, all right, this is what it's going to be. It's happening. And so within the next 2 weeks, I had resumed using as hard as I'd ever used, resumed super risky behaviors, and was hanging out with a whole new group of people in Fayetteville that I had never met before, and they were stealing from me and I was stealing from them, and there was all of these threats, and it was it just started to feel it was progressive, right? It's my addiction and my behaviors and the lengths that I'm willing to go to obtain and use, it gets worse.
And it's amazing how fast it accelerates back to how bad it previously was, when we pick back up again.
It was a matter of weeks. Yeah. 2 weeks later, I had absconded because I got back on track with my parole when I went to rehab. So 2 weeks later, I had absconded again. They had put out a warrant for my arrest. I had I had stolen some from some people over in Fayetteville, so I was headed back to Siloam. I stopped at the casino, got really drunk, tried to drive to I don't know where, pulled over to pass out, and got woke up by a cop. Thank God for that. A part of me is really resentful at the justice system for not helping me. I feel like it harmed me in a lot of ways, but it also kind of subdued the path that I was on a couple times. Yeah. I can only imagine how bad it would have gotten had it not gotten better. So I went to prison for a 4th time, and this time I went to the women's correctional facility that was here in Fayetteville. And this program, it's also a modified therapeutic community, but they actually did all the things that the other one was supposed to do, and it changed my life. This was a model prison for the whole country. we did group therapy. We did a lot of psychoeducational groups. There was smart recovery. There was cognitive behavioral therapy. We were exposed to 12-step programs and different recovery pathways. I met with a counselor every week. It really, truly taught me how to interact with people in a different way, and that they call it snitch camp because you have to write people up for breaking the rules. And some people would snitch on stupid stuff, right? Mm-hmm. But they would also write me up for being super controlling, or they would write me up for not staying in my own lane. And like, it felt petty at the time, but it started to show me these trends in my behavior that disconnected me from other people, that frustrated me, that created like this fear of like not being able to control things well enough in me. And they gave us a format for holding other people accountable as well as being held accountable. Like, I never in my life had to take responsibility for, like, had to sit, acknowledge and take responsibility and then actually change the behavior. Like, I had never been given a platform for changing. I had just been expected to change, and then when I couldn't, you just throw it all away. But that prison, it seriously set my life on a different course. And I was there for 6 months. While I was there, I was thinking about going to transitional living instead of going back home. The only women's transitional living program in all of Washington County has 8 beds. All of Washington County. There are 8 sober living beds for women.
That's not enough.
It's not enough. But I got a bed there. Once I found out that it was a 2-year program, I tried to pull back out. But I had a really cool counselor at that prison who told me, she was like, what are 2 years compared to the whole rest of your life? And I was like, I got to get home to my child. She was like, you are not even with your child when you are home. She was like, take 2 years, get it together, set up a life for y'all, and then you have the whole rest of your life. And that really, I connected with that. Transitional living was great for me. Again, like, I didn't have to figure it out. They were like, this is what you're going to do this week. These are all the things that we've identified that women who are coming out of prison have to work on. So, like, we're going to help you walk through all of these things. And so I had to navigate all of these complex systems, DHS, DMV, going back to work, getting my medical needs met, plugging into a recovery community, and like, I didn't have to just figure it out. Like, I had somebody there to help me. And that was that too. If I knew how to get my life together, if I knew how to show up like y'all needed me to, like, I would have done that a long time ago.
Literally. And people think that, like, you're just supposed to pull yourself up by your bootstraps or whatever, and like, that people getting out of prison or that have had an addiction since they were a fucking child should just be able to magically navigate all of the, like, difficult complexity that exists within society. Like, it's literally impossible. It's no wonder why people are, like, in the revolving door of the criminal justice system or rehabs or whatever when it comes down to this stuff. It's like, people need complete support because it's like, you're going back essentially to everything that you missed starting in childhood, all of that, like, maturing and education and everything. Like, people need whatever support that they need. And I hate that there's only 8 beds for women in Washington County. I'm glad that you were able to get that support. I wish that our society would provide the necessary support to people instead of just pointing the finger at them, Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. And we were talking before this a little bit about how there's a misconception about what people need to rebuild their lives or to get well. And I had fed into that. Like, I thought that I needed to get a job, get a car, get my own place, get my child back. Like, that was the big plan. Like, I didn't even consider, like, learning how to show up on time. Like, very, very basic skills, like, I lacked. I had no idea how to make the hard phone calls when I got out of prison about my other charges because, fun fact, almost everybody who gets out of prison has outstanding charges in another county, in another court, and you have to go back and clean all of that up. You're going to have warrants from missing courts for all those. Like, it is a mess, and I had no idea how to, like, prioritize what my needs are. I had no idea how to identify my needs or prioritize them or address them and then maintain them.
Yeah, I mean, when you're strung out and addicted for that long, that kind of stuff, that kind of like learning about yourself just doesn't come up because we're just kind of focused on survival. I'm curious if they also helped you. To me, what I'm seeing is the pattern of like this persistent loneliness and inability to connect to the difficult emotions, and instead of suppressing them, just kind of like learn to tolerate emotions in a healthy way. Did they support you in that program with emotional needs?
They did some. There was a social worker who's like my case manager, and we connected hard. Like, I felt like she showed up for me in all of the ways that I needed her to. She didn't judge me. She did not get on to me when I was wrong or when I was struggling. I felt like I could be really open and honest with her about what I had been doing, what I was trying to do, what I was facing in the moment, the decisions I was thinking about making. Like, I would reach out to her about everything. And so I would just run everything by her because I didn't know how to manage my own life. I didn't know how to make better choices. Like, I would know what the better choice was, but I didn't know how to follow through with that in any meaningful way. And she just kind of walked me through those things. And so slowly I, started to anticipate what she might say when I would reach out to her, and I would just like make take the next right move. But first I had to learn what that was. And so connecting with that social worker was super, super meaningful to me. I also started going to a 12-step program, which was super hard for me at first. Like, I had no idea how to be around people, that in a relationship that was not transactional. And so I would show up to these meetings, and it's like everybody else knows each other. Everybody's very friendly. Like, they speak a different language, kind of. Like, there's, the language out of their book and their steps and the process. And I just felt very separate and different, and like I wasn't going to fit there. So I worked really hard with a therapist on social anxiety for like the first 6 months of me being out of prison. And it was every week I would show up and I'd be like, oh, I showed up to the meeting. Nobody talked to me. I felt crazy. I felt like I couldn't approach them or interject in their conversations. And then somebody did talk to me and I said something weird. And then I obsessed over it for the whole rest of the week. She'd be like, okay, well, like, why don't we try it like this? Or did you ever think about it like this? And so I would go back out in the world, practice the thing, come back the next week, and we'd talk about it again. And like slowly I learned how to like get out of my head or to get out of my own way or to like quit thinking that everybody's judging me. Like, turns out like everyone's only worried about themselves most
Literally,
of the time.
Yeah.
Like, they're not thinking about that stupid thing that I said 2 weeks ago, but I was obsessing over it. So once I started to like be able to plug into that recovery community, I started connecting with other people. I started hearing their stories. I started caring about them and relating with them. And when they talked about what they did to get well, I started to believe that that would work for me too. And I'm super controlling, and I think I'm smart. Pretty smart, smarter than everybody and everything, and like I can find a better way. And they were like, no, just do what we did, and we're going to show you how. And like, we get to talk through it as you go. So, I had just enough willingness to like try the things and started to see the benefits of like working the steps and being a part of the fellowship. One of the things that, was most impactful for me plugging into that recovery community was, not just being able to show up to be of service, but encouraged to, and really given the skills to be able to show up and be there for other people. Because I think that me showing up for other people is me showing up and telling you what you need to do. And that's generally not the case. Like, if I can show up and share how I was also struggling with this thing, like, these are the things that I did. Do you think that that would work for you too? Or just showing up and just being like, yeah, that's really fucking hard. Like, I'm sorry that you're going through this thing. Like, how can I, what can I do to support you? And if it's nothing, cool. Like, I just, be there with you. And, like, I had to learn how to commit and show up like people needed me to. And I was given the tools and the space to do that with this program. And I started to build relationships outside of what I needed from you or you needed from me, or like what we were going to go do. It's like, one of the ways that I got around needing something to do with people is I started having game nights. Game nights changed my life. Like, I know what to do with my hands. I know what I'm supposed to say to you. We're here together. We're doing a thing. Like, small talk still makes me feel crazy, but like, I can show up and play a game and play my role. And so all throughout my recovery, the trend is like, I show up with a purpose, and I get to be helpful, or I get to fulfill the thing that I said that I would, or I find some way to like participate in whatever the thing is.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love hearing that experience of like, it just reminds me of, have you ever heard someone say, you eat an elephant one bite at a time? Yes, that's what your recovery sounds like to me, where it's like, well, I had this struggle, and then I worked on it long enough with the social worker that I started to learn what she was going to say before she told it to me, right? That's amazing. That's learning, but it doesn't happen the first time you call the social worker, right? You have to do it a million times. And the same thing, like with your experience in 12-step in the recovery circles, like you show up and the first time you're like, I feel insane and this is horrible and I'm so inside my own head. And then you go get advice about it from the people there and from someone outside that you also trust, but you keep trying it. And then eventually, like bit by bit by bit, all of a sudden you're at the point where you're like, having your own game night and like feeling comfortable and showing up and being of service is, I feel like, so important, because I mean, so many people helped us along the way. We're all like so interconnected and we're all like holding each other up. And the thing about being of service is that it's like low-key sort of a little bit selfish, because like when you help other people, it does actually make you feel good too. So I love hearing about all of that stuff and your experience in that community. How has things been since you've been doing the steps and involved in that fellowship, and where are you at with your life now? I know that you started working in the recovery community, so let me know a little bit about what was going on with that.
So I've worked a 12-step program like consistently throughout my whole recovery. Like, it's really been the only constant thing, and so I've been building on it, right? And so, you know, initially working on the steps, I got to work on myself. Right. So I like the initial hard thing for me was like this concept of a higher power. For me, my higher power is the universe and the natural order and direction of things. Like, things are unfolding for me if I will just like let them and participate in that. So like lately I've been calling my higher power my destiny. Right. Like there are things out there for me. And I almost can't fuck it up if I just like let it be. But I try to control and manipulate things to like fit what I think that it needs to be. And what I found is like, if I let things be what they're supposed to be and quit fighting up against that and participate, they are way better than what I could have planned for myself. Like, I never planned, you know, like if you had asked me my hopes and dreams and goals early in recovery, I would have sold myself way short. Like, thank God I didn't get what I had asked for. But I got to work on myself. I, in turn, got to help other people work on themselves. I have found like true purpose in my life in showing up for other people navigating their own recovery journey. And so I worked at that sober living house that I graduated from. I really wanted to get involved in the justice system, and so I worked for Washington County Drug Court for a period. I've had all these jobs where I've gotten to help people figure out like what their path in recovery looks like. And I know and I recognize that like my recovery pathways aren't going to be for everybody. And that was a hard lesson for me, because it's like, I know it works. I know it works. You just have to do exactly what I did.
Yeah, the funny thing, like they tell you like this is the one and only way and it works for everyone and you just have to do it exactly like this. And I'm like, it's cool. Like, it works for who it works for, but it literally doesn't work. And like for me, I was like further traumatized by my experience there. And then sometimes in my brain, I get confused when people do well, and I have to like ground myself and bring myself back and be like, no, we're different from each other, and that's cool. And like a million different things can work for different people. So what is your job now? You said you did the sober living house, a little bit of time in drug court, and then you're working in recovery now, right?
I am. So before I took this job that I have now, I worked for the Goodwill TEO program. So that's the Goodwill Transitional Employment Opportunity. There I worked with people who were justice involved. Like, that's a part of the criteria. Like, you have to have had some kind of charges. And the idea was that we would give you a job, teach you how to keep the job, and then help you get a better job. And all throughout that process, I was doing case management. They were, working in the store, learning how to show up. That's like the first thing that we learn when, if you haven't been, in the workforce, or, you've had, whatever kind of lifestyle, is like, we don't even know how to show up. And so, like, actually, I could show people a lot of grace as they learned how to show up. And then we would start to address some of the, barriers that they were experiencing. A lot of the people that I worked with at the Goodwill TEO program started out unhoused. And so we would take the steps for them to gain safe, supportive, stable housing. It was a big deal.
That's amazing. Honestly.
It was incredible. And so there's 2 different Goodwill TEO programs here in Fayetteville. They're all across the state. They're just out there helping people. And so that was really good for me. But I had to sit still a lot. And we know that I have a hard time sitting still. And so I happened upon my new job when I was helping one of my participants look for a job in the treatment field. So I work for Landmark Recovery now. And my whole job is to build relationships with providers in our community to learn about how they're serving this population of people, what their barriers, their challenges are, if there's room for collaboration with Landmark, or like, how can I show up as a resource for the people who are already interacting with people who struggle with substances. After that, I can help facilitate referrals to the actual treatment center, and I can make sure that our treatment center is equipped with quality, appropriate referrals for when people are coming home. And so I get to help people all throughout that first step of their journey. And I'm also helping providers learn how to show up for people. So I'm meeting with law enforcement, probation, parole, the emergency rooms, other treatment centers, social workers, just like anybody who's interacting with people who need help. Like, I want to offer myself as a resource. Whether or not Landmark is a good fit for them, like, I just get to be helpful. It's incredible.
I love that you're in this field. Y'all, when I met Sophia, she was like, I have this like Facebook group where I try to help people meet their needs or something. Someone needs a mattress. And there's like 3 of us in the room with her, like, does anyone have a mattress? And I'm just like, who is this like amazing person who's just out here like showing up for people in prison reentry and in rehabilitation and everything? It's just like, do you ever feel like with the whole destiny thing that like you kind of had to go through the fucked up immense suffering to have the amount of like empathy and compassion and understanding and just like that drive that you have? Do you feel like that's all connected?
1,000%. Yeah. And when we talk about like what our community needs to support us, like, who knows better than the people who have been through it, right? And so, like, yes, I had to go through a lot of really messed up stuff. And then I had to come through that on the other side, right? Do the work, grow, learn. And then on this side, it's like, I have to be willing to still show up. I have to be willing to share my experience. I have to be willing to advocate for other people. I have to be willing to like say hard things to important people consistently. And, being an advocate and participating in some justice reform and helping folks meet their needs, it drives me, like it fuels me. Like, it is a little bit selfish because it feels really good. And it's sometimes it's hard to, again, still show up for people like they need, because I think I know what you need. Like, you need transitional living, you need to get sober, you need to quit messing with that guy. And like, these are all the ways that you should do that. And it's like, success looks different for different people, and their priorities are different from what I think that they should. And if I'm trying to control that for you, like, you're not engaging with me. Like, you're done with me. And so just like showing that unconditional positive regard for people is something that I'm learning to do. It's not always easy, especially when you watch people struggle. Like, so many people are struggling and just like, in the cycle of like pain and remorse and shame and just like all of these things. And I can't change that for people, but I can have the resources when they ask for it. I can show up to the best of my ability when they ask me to. And sometimes that's the difference between getting what you need and not.
That's brilliant, honestly. Yeah, I mean, the desire to control or like think that our needs are also what someone else needs. I feel like that's like such a normal thought process to go through, but then to take it further and be like, actually, I understand better than that. And yeah, it's hard watching people suffer and just wanting to like grab them and pull them out from the depths. But unfortunately, like all we can do is offer a hand and they have to grab for it,
Yeah. Can we go back?
Yeah.
So earlier when we were talking about a 12-step program and how it's not for everybody, one thing that I've found that is consistent through most every pathway of recovery, what are these things? They're connection, a support system, a community. They're having, some kind of platform for working on yourself, finding purpose, and showing up for other people. Mm-hmm. And it's like I found that pathway through a 12-step recovery program. But like since I've been doing this work, like I've gotten to witness other people get those needs filled in like a completely different way. And so when I first started working in recovery and I've got this 12-step background, it was really hard for me to kind of accept that people had had bad experiences or that it didn't work for them, or that that's not what they wanted. Like, especially when people have had bad experiences, I'm like, oh, no, you didn't have the right bad experience. Mm-hmm. Like, it should be different. Like, they did it wrong. Like, we can do it right. And, like, you need to try it again. And that's really hard for me because I want for people to grow and get well so badly. And I know what a beautiful life I've built through the 12 steps and just like the how vast the benefits for me have been. And like I want that for other people. Like my sister is in recovery, but she doesn't work a program. And so I'm like, oh, she's going through this thing. If she did my program, like she would know how to handle that. But then I get to show up for her. You know what I mean? Like I still get to share my experience with the thing. And like she has her faith like gives her outlets that I don't have access to at all. And she gets to connect with people in a different way that I don't have access to because I'm not in, part of that pathway. And so I really appreciate the spread of different recovery pathways with like Smart Recovery here. Like I was a Smart Recovery facilitator and I definitely see the benefits in like learning those tools and therapy and like a little bit of faith stuff. Like for me, like the faith-based community, like I just had to quit resenting them. And like that's been enough for me.
Yeah, I mean, if that works for someone, let them have it. You know what I mean? Yeah, just keep like if we were all exactly the same, that would make for a quite boring existence.
Yeah, gross.
So, what do you think people don't understand about addiction?
I don't think people want to acknowledge that we've failed people. I think that people want to look at somebody who's struggling with addiction and that person needs to take accountability and blame and like it's up to them, like they put themselves there, like they need to get out of this. And I think that, there's so many systems that fail us or we don't have access to that perpetuate that cycle of abuse. And as we're learning to show up for people, like we can change that. And it's not up to a singular person to get well. And I feel like if they had the ability to change, then they would have.
Literally. If you could speak to someone who's in their darkest days of their addiction right now, what would you say to them?
I'd be like, damn, that sucks. Like, I feel that hard. Like, I remember what that was like to, like, be in the thick of it and nobody will show up for you. And I'm trying, like, I understand that you're probably trying your very hardest to, like, be okay. And, let us show up for you. If you want it, like, we can figure out what that looks like for you. It's a lot harder to get sober than to stay sober. And all of us who are sober have gone through that. Every single one of us. And I really feel like, building those connections with the people who have that lived experience is like key. And so find us. We're here. A lot of us are recovering out loud. And so, reach out.
Yes, I agree. There's so much isolation in addiction, and you feel so alone. And so a lot of people in your life just kind of disappear. So regaining that connection, especially with people who have been through the same experience, there's just nothing that can quite amount to that. So that's wonderful advice. All right. Thank you for speaking with me today. It's been really nice.
Yes, thank you too. I was very nervous. Early, you were really good at this, and I appreciate you for giving me space to talk through these things and for being so supportive.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
All right.
Recovery Demystified is produced and edited by me, Early Brunner. Stevie Petet made our logo. Our social media manager is Kaylee Bausch. Logan Bragg wrote our beautiful theme music. We are entirely supported by donations as a 501c3 nonprofit. Your tax-deductible donations can be made to our Venmo or to our PayPal at Recovery Demystified. May you be happy and free, dear listener.